You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. Well, what an exciting time for the LSU football program and its roster makeover. The transfer portal news is shooting out of Baton Rouge like a fire hose right now. I want to remind you of a couple of things because I think it's important to set some context before we talk about what specifically has happened in the last 20 hours or so, because it's important to understand that it's not going to be like this all the time. LSU played its bowl game with 38 scholarship players. You've heard that story by now. You know how we all feel about it. Ed Ogeron left this program in disrepair. It was brutal, horrible roster management. You all see it now. It's undeniable. Guy was an unmitigated disaster. He's gone, thank God. You had 38 scholarship players. Brian Kelly came in, and what he said immediately was, because he had about 10 days before the early signing period, we're going to recruit the committed players first. It wasn't about driving up the numbers for the early signing period. It was making sure the guys that were committed signed, and they did that. We talked about it. Quality over quantity for the early signing period. So they landed on 13. Remember, you can sign 25 plus an additional 7 over the 25 one-for-one transfer. So a total of 32. You're at 13. You had a ways to go from 13 to 32. You said almost 20 more guys, 19 more guys. So they got busy, and they've really attacked the transfer portal. We've talked about some of those guys already this week that have jumped aboard. Like, Miles Frazier was already there. Got the long snapper from East Carolina. We know earlier this week they added Joe Fouché. So they were starting to build those numbers. Well, on Thursday and then into Friday is when the fire hose effect started. First things first, word came that former 5-star running back from Baton Rouge, Noah Cain, who went to IMG Academy and then landed at Penn State for the first 3 years of his college career. Noah Cain committed to Baton Rouge, said he's coming home. So LSU adds a running back immediately to this class while they still await word from Trevante Citizen, the 2022 prospect from right here in Louisiana. Seemingly minutes after we got the Noah Cain news, we learned that Greg Brooks from Harvey went to West Jeff, defensive back who started his college career at Arkansas, has been a 3-year starter there for the Hogs. Greg Brooks Jr. committed to LSU as a transfer, joining Joe Fouché. So that's not one, but 2 Arkansas defensive backs leaving Arkansas to finish their career at LSU. If that wasn't enough, LSU got more news on Friday when Kyren Lacy from ULL, who had been their leading receiver the past 2 years, as far as touchdowns anyway, Kyren Lacy from Thibodeau commits to LSU. So, just like that, in a matter of about 12 hours, LSU lands 3 more commitments. And of course, Mekhi Gardner, also from ULL earlier this week, committed. So right now, LSU is at 19. They went from 13 in the early signing period to now really attacking the transfer portal, and they are at 19 for this class. Remember, they can sign up to 32. When Billy Embody was with us on Thursday, I asked him about the numbers, and he said he didn't think they'd get to 32, but they'd get close. I believe he said the number he landed on was maybe 29. So give or take, LSU still has a lot of work to do, but they're getting there. And I'm going to talk about each player individually in a second. But the thing that's most important to remember here is that it's not going to be like this every year. I know that we're sitting here thinking, well, transfer portal, et cetera, and this is just the new norm. No. Yeah, you will always have transfers in and out. As long as there is immediate eligibility waiver, as long as there's a transfer portal, and guys can have immediate eligibility right away, yes, there are going to be players who look for greener pastures, who look for immediate playing time. That will always be the case. There will be coaches looking to supplement their roster with ready-made, plug-and-play experienced college football players. That will always be the case. It's not going to be to this degree with LSU every year because you're going to find stability in this program. You're going to find stability within the roster. You're not going to be looking at 38 scholarship players in a bowl game. You're going to manage your roster better because you have a competent coach that's proven he can do that over 4 decades as a head coach. So you worry less about this much activity moving forward. I would almost compare it to Will Wade's first season in Baton Rouge. Will Wade's first season in Baton Rouge, he inherited literally the worst basketball team LSU had in 50 years. They won 2 conference games. So what did he do? He came in and boom, boom, boom. He turned over 3/4 of the roster. He went and sought grad transfers, JUCO players, went and tried to sign high school flip kids. Tremont Waters, of course, jumped into that class, and they became an NIT team. Now, then he started to build through the recruiting process. He didn't have to go for immediate plug-and-play guys, but he wasn't willing just to take a complete mulligan year one. And Brian Kelly's doing the same here. He's not taking a mulligan year one. He's trying to win now. And when you have the type of numbers LSU did, you can't just bring in a bunch of high school seniors that are going to be college freshmen and say, go get them, because you're not going to win in the SEC at the level LSU expects to win with a bunch of freshmen. So you've got to get guys that are proven college football players. Is LSU at cornerback better without Elias Ricks and Dwight McGlothern and with, say, Gregory Brooks and Mekhi Garner? No, they're not better than they would have been. But are they better with these veteran guys on the field than they'd be if they had to go start LaTerrence Welsh and Jordan Allen? No disrespect to those guys, but they're incoming freshmen. That's a big ask right away. So it's just going to be like that this year in the short term. You're also going to lose players. One of them today was Devonta Lee, who, man, he just flipped. A kid from A-Mead who came here to LSU, flipped back and forth offense and defense, never really found a home, did establish himself this year deep on the wide receiver chart. I'll tell you this, the biggest mistake that LSU made with respect to Devonta Lee was not sticking him at linebacker and making him a linebacker. Nick Saban in Alabama tried to recruit Devonta Lee as a linebacker. He wanted to play offense, and LSU never found a spot for him. Back and forth he went. Had they played him at linebacker, you would have been talking about a situation like with Christopher Allen. Or, I mean, these guys who were from Baton Rouge who didn't end up at LSU because LSU didn't have a plan for him, and Saban had a very clear vision. Devonta Lee should have been a linebacker at LSU. That's, again, mismanaging your roster. But wish him luck wherever it is that he goes. So 3 in, 1 out. Quick thumbnail on each of these guys. Let me... I'll start with the defensive guy. So Greg Brooks comes in, 3 years at Arkansas. He's been a starter there for 3 years. He's played in 33 games. He's from West Jeff, made 111 tackles. He projects more as a nickel, does Greg Brooks. And it's the interesting part about Greg Brooks becomes if he projects as a nickel, then what do you do with Sage Ryan? I think in my head, and maybe some of you feel the same way, we kind of have this perceived idea of what's going to happen with guys who are already here. For example, like we saw Sage Ryan last year play that nickel safety role. We saw Jay Ward play safety. Well, maybe the way Brian Kelly or Matt House defensively is going to view these guys is moving Sage Ryan back to safety. Maybe the answer that you need at corner is bringing Jay Ward back to corner where you know he's competent enough to play. Maybe moving Sage Ryan to safety and then Brooks to nickel and Jay Ward to corner. Maybe that gets your best 5 or 6 defensive backs on the field. So roles are to me, what's going to be the most important part of that secondary. You've got safeties, and we've rolled through this. You've added Joe Fouché. You've got Greg Brooks who can play that sort of nickel safety role. I mentioned Jay Ward. We talked about Sage Ryan there. You got guys like Davis and Langlois and Tolles who have been around. So you have numbers at safety. That's not so much a problem. Filling roles is really kind of going to be the big question here. Offensively, Noah Cain is fascinating because he was as a freshman at Penn State, became their starting running back, was injured in the 2020 season, the pandemic season. He was injured in the first game. Remember Penn State played that crazy game against against Indiana in the opener. He was injured in that opener, had a season-ending injury, and it was never really disclosed what the injury was. He came back this year, started the first 3 games, and then just sort of lost his spot. So What that means, effectively, it provided an amazing opportunity for LSU to be able to go get a guy like Noah Cain, who was so highly sought after, highly recruited, especially when you lose Ty Davis Price and you just don't have much production returning here. John Emery's back, but he's never really been a starter. Trey Bradford, you bounce back and forth from Oklahoma to Baton Rouge. Corey Kiner is still on the roster. Armani Goodwin, Josh Williams, the former walk-on. You assume you're going to lose somebody here in this group that's currently here. But Noah Cain's a guy that's stylistically more of a complete back, more so than, say, John Emery, who does have the big home run potential. So the other thing about Noah Cain is his local ties. I mean, this is Michael Clayton's cousin. He's a Baton Rouge native who went to IMG. And the underlying theme, and the last guy, of course, I mentioned is Kyren Lacy, who's from Thibodeau, who led ULL in receiving touchdowns the past 2 seasons. LSU has seen 5 wide receivers enter the portal. Now, we've talked about it, but you've still got a glut of talent there. You've got Keishon Butte coming back. You return Jeray Jenkins, Besh, Neighbors, Thomas, Hilton. You got dudes at that position. So Kyren Lacy's going to have to earn his reps. But what we've also found is, man, injuries happen. Guys drop passes. Dude, you think highly of that don't emerge. I mean, it's good. It's good to have depth. And now, of course, with Devonta Lee out as well, Trey Palmer's transferred. You need depth there. But the biggest underlying point here with all of these transfers, as I point out all of them, they've all had ties to Louisiana. 4 of the kids are from Louisiana. Then Mekhi Garner is from Texas, but has been playing at ULL. Y'all, in the NIL era, undeniably, there are schools that have advantages. Texas, Texas A&M, Georgia. Like, we've been through it. It's no surprise why certain schools are doing what they're doing in recruiting right now. There are certain schools that are going to have advantages that LSU doesn't. LSU's not as wealthy as those schools. But LSU, its inherent advantage is that it's the only Power 5 in a talent-rich state, and there are guys that just want to play here. Why would Joe Fouché, a team captain, leave Arkansas to come to Baton Rouge? Because he gets to play in front of his home state, his home team, his family. That's why it matters. And that's going to matter to a lot of guys. Yes, there's going to be guys you lose, undeniably. But there's also going to be the Walker Howards and the Will Campbells and the Kyren Lacys and the Joe Fouchés and the Gregory Brookses and the Noah Cains that are going to be willing to play here and want to play here because it's here. So that is going to be a benefit for LSU throughout this NIL transfer portal era. Every year is not going to be like this one, right? The numbers aren't going to be like this every year. It's going to stabilize. But Brian Kelly's doing work right now, building back this roster with proven college football players. And every player he adds is another rung up the ladder of consistency and stability for 2022 that's going to keep increasing expectations and should. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.